The void of space stretched endlessly beyond the observation deck, its silence broken only by the hum of Earth's newest warship, the Invictus. Admiral Elias Rourke stood rigid, his piercing gaze fixed on the holographic display before him. A red cluster blinked. Imperial reconnaissance vessels. They were here. He turned to his second-in-command, Commander Arya Voss, whose expression was unreadable. "They finally noticed us," she murmured. "They were always going to," Rourke replied, voice steady. "Now, they'll learn what we've been preparing for." For centuries, the Galactic Empire had cast Earth aside, deeming humanity primitive, unworthy of conquest or diplomacy. That dismissal had been Earth's greatest advantage. They had watched, learned, and in the shadows, built a force unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. Their ships were not just war machines. They were engineered revolutions, wielding weapons designed to shatter Imperial arrogance. "Orders?" Voss asked. Rourke's jaw tightened. "Let them get close. Let them think they have control." The bridge crew moved efficiently, their training honed for this moment. Every officer here knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about Earth. Countless species across the galaxy lived under the Empire's boot, their civilization stripped of autonomy. If humanity failed today, they would be crushed before they could ever challenge the throne world itself. The Imperial reconnaissance fleet approached, sleek and predatory. Arrogance radiated from their formation. They had come expecting easy prey. Rourke let them advance, counting the seconds. When they crossed the threshold of the ambush zone, his voice rang clear. Fire! The Invictus and its hidden fleet erupted in fury. Plasma lances carved through the darkness, piercing Imperial hulls before their shields could fully engage. Explosions bloomed in the vacuum, silent yet final. The Empire's ships scrambled to respond, but their formations had not accounted for an enemy that fought with precision, with purpose. One of the Imperial cruisers attempted to retreat. Voss gave a grim smile. Not today. A pulse of energy from the Invictus's main cannon ripped through its core, splitting it into fragments. Within moments, the skirmish was over. Humanity had struck first. Rourke exhaled slowly. "They'll send more." Voss nodded. "And we'll be ready." The battle had been a warning, a message carved in fire and wreckage. The Galactic Empire had ignored Earth for too long. Now, humanity was stepping into the stars, and they weren't coming in peace. The Imperial High Command had not known fear in centuries. From their seat of power on Veliker Prime, they had watched empires rise and fall, rebellion sputter into nothing, and would-be challengers crushed before it could become threats. But the destruction of their reconnaissance fleet near Sol had sent a tremor through their ranks, subtle yet undeniable. Grand Admiral Zyra stood at the heart of the War Council chamber, her expression carved from stone as the Emperor's advisors debated. She listened, arms crossed behind her back, letting their panic swirl around her like a storm. "This species was supposed to be beneath our notice," Minister Orlon hissed, his three pale eyes flashing with agitation. "An unremarkable world, barely acknowledged in our archives." "That was our mistake," Zyra said, her voice cutting through the noise. Silence followed. "We assumed they would remain insignificant. They did not." The room shifted uneasily. The Empire had ruled unchallenged for so long that even the suggestion of a worthy opponent felt absurd. But Zyra had studied the battle reports. Humanity had not simply won by chance. They had anticipated Imperial tactics, exploited weaknesses no one had dared expose. That level of precision did not come from desperation. It came from preparation. The Emperor's voice finally filled the chamber, deep and deliberate. "What do you propose, Grand Admiral?" Zyra did not hesitate. A swift and overwhelming response. "We strike before they can gain further momentum." The order was given. An armada, vast and merciless, mobilized toward the contested sectors. Humanity had declared itself an enemy of the Empire. Now, the Empire would remind them why none had ever survived such a challenge. Across the void, aboard the Invictus, Admiral Rourke studied intelligence reports with Voss at his side. Their recent victory had been decisive, but had also invited the inevitable. The Empire would retaliate. "They'll come in force," Voss murmured, scanning the intercepted transmissions. "They've never faced an enemy like us, but they won't make the same mistakes twice. Rourke leaned over the holographic table, the simulated warfront shifting under his touch. Then we'll make them pay for every step they take. The fleet had grown beyond Earth's own forces. Across the stars, the oppressed had seen humanity's defiance and dared believe in something beyond fear. Ships once scattered across the galaxy now converge in secret locations. Captains once forced to kneel under the Empire's rule, now preparing to strike. One such ally stood before Rourke now, Commander Vekal of the Dralith Dominion, a feline-like species whose people had suffered under the Empire's grip for centuries, studied the war maps with narrowed golden eyes. "My people have long waited for a chance to wound our captors," he said, his voice low and sharp. "But what you offer is more than just a wound. You seek to bring them to their knees." Rourke met his gaze without flinching. "Would you settle for anything less?" A slow, knowing smile curled across Vekal's features. "No, I would not." The Free Alliance was taking form. Once scattered forces now moved with purpose, united by a single truth: the Empire could bleed. It did not take long for the second battle to come. Proxima Centauri became the next battlefield, a crucial choke point in the Empire's supply routes. The enemy arrived in numbers that would have crushed any rebellion before. But this was no rebellion. This was war. As the first wave of Imperial ships entered the system, the Invictus and its fleet waited, hidden among the vast asteroid fields. Humanity's forces struck not with desperation, but with calculated brutality. Where the Empire relied on sheer dominance, Earth and its allies wielded strategy, adaptability, and weapons designed to dismantle arrogance. Explosions flared against the endless dark. Imperial warships, once symbols of unstoppable conquest, burned. On the bridge of her command ship, Grand Admiral Zyra watched, eyes narrowed, as her forces struggled. Her mind worked through possibilities, calculations of what had gone wrong. Humanity's ships moved in ways Imperial doctrine had never accounted for. Their weapons cut through shields as if they had studied every flaw in Imperial engineering. It was no longer a question of whether this was a serious threat. It was a question of how deep this wound would go. Zyra made a decision. She sent the order for retreat, a rare and costly maneuver in Imperial history. But she had seen enough to know that brute force alone would not end this war. The moment the last Imperial vessel disappeared into the void, cheers erupted across the Invictus. Another victory, another crack in the Empire's armor. Rourke did not celebrate. He turned to Voss, his voice steady. "They'll come back." She nodded, "and we'll be ready." The Imperial fleet descended upon the Orion sector like a storm of fire and steel. From the bridge of the Invictus, Admiral Elias Rourke watched the tactical display as wave upon wave of warships surged through the void, their colossal forms blotting out the distant stars. Grand Admiral Zyra had arrived in force. This was no mere show of strength. It was a hammer meant to break humanity's rebellion before it could spread. Commander Arya Voss stood beside him, arms crossed, her gaze sharp as she analyzed the incoming fleet. "They're committing everything to this fight." "They have to," Rourke replied. "We've taken too much ground, humiliated them too many times. They can't afford another loss." The battlefield stretched between the warring forces, a graveyard of shattered hulls and drifting debris from the earlier skirmishes. Smaller engagements had bled the Empire's forces, but it hadn't been enough. Now, the final confrontation loomed. The bridge of the Invictus was tense but controlled. Officers worked with machine-like efficiency, relaying data and preparing for what was to come. There was no room for doubt. They had come too far, won too much, to falter now. Rourke turned to Vekal, the Dralith commander who had become one of their most trusted allies. The feline-like warrior's golden eyes flickered in the dim glow of the war table. "You still believe we can win this?" Vekal asked, though there was no fear in his voice, only a soldier's pragmatism. "We don't have a choice," Rourke said. "This isn't just about us anymore. If we fall, every species under their rule will stay in chains forever." The Empire had always ruled through the illusion of invincibility. That illusion was breaking. Across the galaxy, revolts had begun in systems that had long suffered in silence. If humanity held the line here, if they shattered the Empire's fleet, The entire structure of their dominion would begin to collapse. A warning klaxon blared. The enemy was within firing range. Shields to full, Rourke commanded. All ships, execute the Orion Gambit. The fleet moved like a tide, splitting into smaller formations that weaved the battlefield with coordinated precision. Where the Empire relied on overwhelming numbers and brute force, humanity and its allies wielded adaptability. Striking where they were least expected, the first exchange of fire turned the void into a burning canvas. Beams of energy lanced across the blackness, detonations rippling through the enemy ranks as well-placed shots tore through Imperial cruisers. But the Empire retaliated with ruthless efficiency, their dreadnoughts unleashing barges that melted ships into slag. On the Invictus, the deck shook as impacts rippled across the hull. Damage reports flooded in, but Rourke barely acknowledged them. His focus was locked on the battlefield, on the movement of the enemy, on the shape of the fight as it unfolded. Grand Admiral Zyra was no fool. She adapted, redirecting her forces, her own strategies shifting to counter their maneuvers. She pressed forward, using the Empire's sheer numerical advantage to push the Alliance back. "They're tightening the noose," Voss muttered. "If we don't break their line soon." Rourke was already moving, issuing new orders. Signal the Peregrine and the Vanguard. Execute the Helix strike. Far across the battlefield, two of humanity's most advanced warships altered course, their engines burning bright as they spiraled around the enemy's flank. At the same time, Vekal's Drala forces struck from the opposite side, forcing the Imperial ships to divide their focus. For a moment, it worked. The Empire's formation wavered. A dreadnought, its shields failing, erupted in a chain reaction that sent shockwaves across the sector. Then the Celestial Annihilator arrived. The superweapon was unlike anything humanity had ever faced, an orbital behemoth, its surface bristling with city-sized cannons that pulsed with an eerie, golden light. It emerged from the depths of hyperspace like a god of war, turning the tide in an instant. The first shot fired from its main weapon struck a moon-sized asteroid in the battlefield's periphery. The rock shattered into nothingness, reduced to subatomic dust. Voss inhaled sharply. "If that thing fires at our fleet, we don't give it a chance," Rourke cut in. His mind raced, calculations forming faster than he could voice them. A direct attack would be suicide. The Annihilator's defenses were impenetrable, its weaponry capable of wiping out entire armadas. But no fortress was without weakness. He turned to the bridge crew, prepped the infiltration team. "We're taking that thing down from the inside." Voss met his gaze. "You mean to board it?" Rourke nodded. A dangerous silence settled over the bridge. The battle outside raged, the fleet struggling against impossible odds. But in this moment, another war was about to begin. The kind fought not with fleets, but with fire and steel and heart, the enemy's strongest weapon. And if they failed, there would be no one left to fight the next battle. The boarding craft cut through the darkness, weaving between wreckage and burning debris as it closed in on the Celestial Annihilator. Admiral Elias Rourke gripped the harness beside him, his gaze fixed on the monstrous superweapon looming ahead. The Empire's last, desperate gambit. The behemoth hung in the void like a sleeping god, its golden energy pulses illuminating the battlefield with an eerie rhythm. If it was allowed to fire on the fleet again, there would be no battle left to fight. Commander Arya Voss checked her weapon, her expression grim. "We won't get a second shot at this." "We don't need one," Rourke said. Beside them, Vekal tightened the straps of his combat armor. The Draloth warrior's golden eyes burned with quiet intensity. "We fight to the last breath," he said. No hesitation. The boarding craft jolted as it pierced through the Annihilator's docking bay, its hull grinding against the metal before coming to a sharp halt. Alarms blared as the Empire's forces rushed to intercept them. The ramp dropped and chaos erupted. Rourke led the charge, plasma fire cutting through the first wave of Imperial guards. Voss moved with lethal precision beside him, her shots striking weak points in their armor. Vekal and his soldiers surged forward, a blur of claws and energy blades. The corridor was a killing ground, the walls scorched and slick with the aftermath of battle. "Command deck is 8 levels up," Voss shouted over the din. "We need to move now." They pushed forward, cutting through the resistance with brutal efficiency. Every moment counted. The longer they took, the more time the Empire had to regroup. And if Zyra realized what they were doing, she would turn the Annihilators full might on their fleet without hesitation. An explosion rocked the corridor, sending shrapnel through the air. Rourke ducked behind cover as enemy reinforcements flooded in. He gritted his teeth. They needed a way up, fast. Then he saw it, a maintenance shaft, half hidden behind a collapsed bulkhead. There! He motioned to Voss and Vekal. That leads to the upper levels. They forced their way through, climbing into the darkness. The shaft was narrow, the climb brutal, but they pushed upward, muscles burning. Below them, the sounds of battle raged on. At the top, Rourke forced open the access hatch. They emerged into a vast, cathedral-like chamber, the core of the Annihilator. Golden energy pulsed in massive conduits, feeding the weapon's devastating power. In the center, a control platform overlooked a vast mechanism, where Imperial officers scrambled at their consoles. And standing at the helm, waiting for them, was Grand Admiral Zyra. She did not reach for a weapon. She did not call for guards. Instead, she turned to face them with the quiet confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. "You fight well," she said, her voice smooth, unreadable. "But this ends here." Rourke raised his weapon. "It ends when we bring the station down." Zyra tilted her head, the barest hint of amusement in her gaze. "You think destroying this will win the war?" She gestured to the battlefield beyond the viewport. "You may win this fight, but the Empire does not fall in a day." "No," Rourke admitted, "but this is where it starts." Voss fired first. Zyra moved faster. She twisted out of the way, drawing an energy blade in a fluid motion. The fight was instant, brutal. Vekal met her in close combat, his own blade clashing against hers in a flurry of sparks. Rourke and Voss turned their fire on the officers, cutting down those who reached for weapons. Alarms wailed. The entire station was on alert now. Zyra fought with terrifying precision, every strike calculated, every movement lethal. But she was outnumbered. Vekal feinted, forcing her to pivot, just as Rourke fired. The shot struck true. Zyra staggered, gripping her side, blood seeping through her uniform. Her golden eyes locked onto Rourke, unreadable. Then, with a final glance at the burning fleet beyond, she activated the emergency controls. The Annihilator shuddered. The conduits pulsed erratically. She had triggered a self-destruct sequence. "Move!" Rourke shouted. They ran. The station trembled beneath them, explosions ripping through its core. Fire and metal rained as they reached the escape bay, sealing themselves inside a shuttle just as the Annihilator began to tear itself apart. From the Invictus, they watched as the superweapon detonated, a blinding eruption of light and debris. The Imperial fleet, leaderless and reeling, faltered. Some ships fled. Others surrendered. The tide had turned. Rourke exhaled, his hands steady. "It's over." Voss glanced at the shattered remnants of the Empire's greatest weapon. "No," she said. "It's just beginning."